crimes so shocking that they force entire communities to question everything they thought they knew about the people living next door. Not because the violence was committed in broad daylight, nor because the killer left behind a trail of obvious clues, but because the person responsible looked like someone incapable of such unimaginable cruelty. History has shown that some of the most dangerous killers never fit society's expectations. They don't hide behind masks or lurk in dark alleyways. They attend family gatherings. They greet neighbors with warm smiles. They comfort grieving friends. They stand beside coffins with tears in their eyes while no one realizes they helped place the victim inside. In the quiet towns of central New York, one woman would eventually become the embodiment of that terrifying reality. For years, 𝙒𝙤 𝙤𝙧 appeared to be a woman haunted by unbearable misfortune. She had lost one husband unexpectedly. Then, years later, another. Friends couldn't imagine the emotional weight she carried. Many admired her determination to continue raising her daughter despite suffering tragedies that most people could never comprehend. People described her as resilient, compassionate, strong. No one looked at 𝙒𝙤 𝙤𝙧 and saw a murderer. If anything, she seemed like someone life had treated unfairly. But investigators would eventually discover that sometimes the greatest disguise isn't a fake identity. It's the appearance of innocence. Long before her name became known across America, 𝙒𝙤 lived what seemed to be an ordinary life. She married Michael Wallace, a hardworking man devoted to providing for his family. Together, they welcomed a daughter, Ashley, who quickly became the center of their world. Their home wasn't perfect, but neither was anyone else's. Like countless families, they faced financial pressures, occasional disagreements, and the everyday responsibilities that come with raising a child. To neighbors, they looked like a normal family building a future together. Michael was known as a dependable father who cared deeply for Ashley. Friends remembered him as someone willing to lend a hand whenever it was needed. Nothing suggested that his life would end years before anyone expected. Then, in January 2000, Michael suddenly became gravely ill. The illness progressed with astonishing speed. What initially appeared to be a medical emergency quickly became something far more devastating. Despite receiving treatment, Michael Wallace died. Doctors concluded that he had suffered what appeared to be a fatal heart attack. His death certificate reflected that finding. Family members mourned. Friends attended his funeral. No detectives questioned the circumstances. No one suspected that poison could imitate a natural medical crisis. The case quietly faded into memory. For 𝙒𝙤, life became a painful journey through grief. She focused on raising Ashley while attempting to rebuild a future that had been shattered without warning. Time slowly eased the pain. Then someone new entered her life. His name was David Castor. David worked as an air conditioning technician and was widely regarded as dependable and hardworking. Those who knew him described a friendly man with a steady personality and a willingness to help others whenever he could. The relationship between David and 𝙒𝙤 developed naturally. Eventually, they married. To family and friends, it seemed as though happiness had finally returned after years of heartbreak. Ashley hoped the difficult chapter surrounding her father's death had finally come to an end. For a while, everything appeared peaceful. Birthdays were celebrated. Holidays came and went. Photographs captured smiles that looked genuine. The family settled into an ordinary routine that gave little reason for concern. Yet beneath the surface, cracks slowly began to form. People close to the couple would later remember arguments becoming more frequent. There were moments of tension that suggested the marriage wasn't as stable as it appeared. Still, disagreements between spouses are common. Nothing pointed toward murder. Nothing suggested another funeral was approaching. Then, during the final days of August 2005, David suddenly stopped showing up for work. That wasn't like him. Coworkers attempted to contact him. Calls went unanswered. As concern grew, someone decided to check on him personally. Inside the Castor home, they found something no one expected. David Castor was dead. His body lay inside the bedroom. The door had been locked. Next to him rested a drinking glass containing a bright green liquid. Nearby sat an open container of antifreeze. To responding officers, everything appeared painfully obvious. A locked room, a poisonous substance, a deceased husband. It looked like suicide. When detectives spoke with Stacy, she explained that David had been struggling emotionally. According to her account, he had taken his own life after battling personal difficulties. Given the evidence visible at the scene, her explanation seemed believable. There appeared to be little reason to doubt the grieving widow. Once again, Stacy found herself surrounded by sympathy. Once again, friends embraced her. Once again, another husband was gone. For a brief moment, investigators believed the case would be closed just as quickly as Michael Wallace's had been years earlier. Then, the medical examiner began asking questions. The amount of antifreeze found inside David's body was undeniable. But something about the evidence refused to make sense. Experienced investigators knew that antifreeze has an extremely unpleasant taste. Victims who consume it voluntarily often struggle to swallow enough to cause death unless it's disguised or mixed with something sweet. That observation alone wasn't enough to prove murder, but it was enough to make detectives look closer. As they reconstructed David's final hours, additional inconsistencies slowly emerged. His injuries, the positioning of objects inside the room, the timeline. None of it fit together as neatly as everyone first believed. Then came the discovery that changed everything. Investigators learned David had written no suicide note. For a man supposedly overwhelmed enough to end his own life, there was no explanation left behind for family or friends. No final goodbye. No apology. No message. Only silence. Detectives refused to ignore the growing list of unanswered questions. The more evidence they collected, the less convincing the suicide theory became. And if David hadn't taken his own life, then someone else had been inside that house. Someone who wanted investigators to believe the impossible. Someone who had already succeeded once before without anyone noticing. The decision was made quietly. Without attracting attention, detectives began digging deeper into Stacy Castor's life. They wanted to understand not only David's final hours, but also the relationships surrounding him. As interviews continued, a picture slowly emerged that differed from the one Stacy had carefully presented. Friends described David as someone who looked forward to the future. He had responsibilities at work, projects he intended to finish, and plans that extended well beyond the week he died. Nothing about his recent behavior suggested he had reached the point of taking his own life. Investigators also learned that the marriage had not been as peaceful as it appeared from the outside. Several witnesses recalled increasing tension between the couple during the months leading up to David's death. While disagreements between spouses are common, detectives noted every statement, searching for anything that might explain what had happened inside the Castor home. As the investigation expanded, forensic specialists began examining items collected from the house. Computers, documents, personal records. Every piece of evidence was treated as though it might contain the answer everyone was searching for. Then investigators noticed something unusual. A document connected to David's supposed suicide appeared to have been created on the family computer. That discovery immediately raised new questions. If David had truly intended to end his own life, why would there be uncertainty surrounding the document's origin? Computer forensic experts recovered information showing activity that investigators believed was inconsistent with Stacy's account of events. Digital evidence began establishing a timeline that was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. Unlike eyewitness testimony, computers leave traces. Files are created, edited, saved, deleted. Even when someone believes information has disappeared forever, fragments often remain hidden within the system. As specialists reconstructed the computer's history, detectives became convinced someone had attempted to shape the narrative surrounding David's death. The investigation was no longer centered on proving suicide. It had become an effort to identify the person responsible for staging one. Meanwhile, Stacy continued speaking with investigators, maintaining that she had nothing to hide. She answered questions, denied any involvement in David's death, and insisted the tragedy had devastated her. But detectives noticed something else. Whenever conversations turned toward specific pieces of evidence, her explanations began to shift. Certain details changed. Timelines became less precise. Small inconsistencies appeared where earlier statements had seemed confident. One contradiction might be dismissed as a mistake. Several contradictions demanded attention. As investigators assembled each new piece of evidence, they reached a troubling conclusion. If David had been murdered, the person responsible almost certainly knew him well enough to gain his trust. This wasn't the act of a stranger. It was someone from inside his own circle. Someone with access. Someone familiar with the home. Someone capable of moving through it without raising suspicion. Detectives continued reviewing financial records connected to David's estate. The findings reinforced their belief that his death benefited Stacy in significant ways. While financial gain alone could never establish guilt, it strengthened the emerging theory that David's death had not been random. Still, investigators knew they needed something stronger than suspicion. They needed evidence that could survive scrutiny in court. That breakthrough came from a place no one expected. As detectives continued interviewing people close to the family, their attention gradually shifted toward Ashley Wallace. At first, Ashley was viewed only as David's stepdaughter, another grieving family member, another victim of unimaginable loss. She had already buried her biological father years earlier. Now she was mourning the man who had become her stepfather. Investigators had no reason to suspect she would soon become the center of the entire case. Then, without warning, Ashley was rushed to the hospital. She had been found unconscious after apparently consuming a large quantity of prescription medication. Doctors worked urgently to save her life. The situation looked like a suicide attempt. Inside the house, investigators discovered what appeared to be a handwritten confession. According to the letter, Ashley admitted responsibility for David's death. It went even further. The note claimed she had also murdered her own father, Michael Wallace, years earlier. If the confession was genuine, it would completely transform the investigation. The woman detectives had begun to suspect would suddenly become another victim. But something about the document immediately felt wrong. Experienced investigators had seen genuine suicide notes before. This one carried an unsettling quality that was difficult to explain. The language, the timing, the extraordinary admissions. It was almost too perfect. Rather than bringing the investigation to an end, the confession created an entirely new mystery. Because if Ashley had truly written those words, why would she attempt suicide only after detectives began questioning her mother's story? And if she hadn't, then someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to place two murders on the shoulders of a young woman fighting for her life. Ashley Wallace was unconscious when she arrived at the hospital. Doctors immediately recognized that her condition was critical. She had ingested a potentially fatal quantity of prescription medication, and every passing minute reduced her chances of survival. As emergency physicians worked tirelessly to stabilize her, Detectives turned their attention to the handwritten confession they had recovered. If the letter was authentic, the investigation was over. If it wasn't, someone had attempted one of the boldest cover-ups they had ever encountered. The note claimed Ashley had murdered David Castor by poisoning him with antifreeze. Even more shocking, it alleged that years earlier she had also poisoned her biological father, Michael Wallace. The document painted Ashley as a young woman consumed by guilt, unable to live with what she had done. But almost immediately, investigators began noticing problems. The timing made little sense. Ashley had never been considered a suspect until detectives started questioning Stacy's version of events. Now, suddenly, a confession appeared that solved every unanswered question at once. It was too convenient. Detectives sent the document for forensic examination, while computer specialists continued analyzing the family computer. What they discovered changed everything. The confession had not simply appeared. Evidence showed it had been typed and edited on the Castor family computer before it was ever written by hand. Investigators were able to reconstruct portions of the computer's activity, revealing that someone had spent time carefully preparing the document. This wasn't a spontaneous confession. It looked planned. Every new discovery pointed investigators in the same direction. The confession had not been created by Ashley. It had been created for Ashley. While detectives were assembling the digital evidence, Ashley slowly regained consciousness in the hospital. Weak and confused, she struggled to understand why investigators were asking whether she had written a confession. She had no idea what they were talking about. When detectives showed her portions of the letter, Ashley denied writing it. She denied poisoning David. She denied harming her father. Most importantly, she denied attempting to end her own life. Instead, she described the hours before she lost consciousness. Ashley explained that her mother had invited her over to the house. During the visit, Stacy prepared an alcoholic drink for her. Ashley remembered consuming only a small amount before becoming overwhelmingly tired. Her memory faded rapidly after that. The next thing she remembered was waking up in a hospital bed, surrounded by medical staff. Her statement immediately caught investigators' attention. If Ashley's account was accurate, she hadn't attempted suicide at all. She had been poisoned. Laboratory testing supported that possibility. The medication found in Ashley's body was consistent with the drugs investigators later believed had been placed into her drink. Suddenly, detectives weren't investigating one suspicious death. They were investigating an attempted murder. And the intended victim was the one person who could destroy Stacy Castor's carefully constructed story. The motive was becoming painfully clear. If Ashley died, the confession would likely be accepted as genuine. Investigators would believe she had murdered both David Castor and Michael Wallace before taking her own life. Stacy would remain the grieving mother left behind to mourn yet another unimaginable tragedy. It was a plan that, had it succeeded, might have ended the investigation forever. But Ashley survived. That single fact changed everything. Detectives returned to the Castor home with renewed determination. This time, they weren't looking for inconsistencies. They were looking for proof. The search uncovered additional evidence linking Stacy to the forged confession and to the events surrounding Ashley's poisoning. Each new discovery strengthened the case prosecutors were preparing. The woman who had once appeared to be surrounded by misfortune was now at the center of an expanding criminal investigation. Eventually, detectives believed they had gathered enough evidence. The case that had begun with what looked like a suicide had evolved into allegations of murder, attempted murder, and an elaborate effort to frame an innocent daughter. Authorities arrested Stacy Castor. The image of the grieving widow disappeared overnight. In its place stood a woman accused of poisoning her husband, attempting to kill her own child, and fabricating evidence to conceal it all. Yet one question still remained unanswered. Could prosecutors prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt? Because suspicion, no matter how strong, is never enough. Now, the fate of 𝙭𝙭would be decided, where every major criminal case ultimately arrives. Inside a courtroom. Inside the courtroom, prosecutors faced a difficult task. There were no eyewitnesses who had watched David Castor die. There was no video recording capturing the crime. Instead, the case depended on whether jurors believed the overwhelming collection of circumstantial evidence pointed to one person and one person alone. Piece by piece, prosecutors reconstructed the events leading to David Castor's death. They argued that 𝙭had poisoned her husband with antifreeze before carefully arranging the bedroom to resemble a suicide. They presented evidence that challenged the defense's version of events and demonstrated why investigators believed David had never intended to take his own life. The jury also heard about Ashley Wallace. Her testimony became one of the most emotional moments of the trial. Ashley described waking up in a hospital bed, learning she had nearly died, and discovering investigators believed she had confessed to murdering not one, but two people. She firmly denied every accusation. She told jurors she loved her father. She cared about David. She had never written the confession found inside the house. Most heartbreaking of all, she explained that she believed her own mother had betrayed her in the most unimaginable way. For prosecutors, Ashley's survival changed everything. Had she died, investigators may never have questioned the confession. Instead, the young woman prosecutors believed had been chosen as the perfect scapegoat was now sitting before the jury, able to tell her own story. Computer forensic experts followed. They explained how investigators recovered evidence showing the confession had been prepared on the family computer before it appeared in handwritten form. Digital records helped establish a sequence of events that prosecutors argued could not be explained by coincidence. Forensic specialists also presented evidence gathered during the investigation, supporting the prosecution's theory that the scene inside the Castor home had been deliberately staged. The defense challenged the prosecution at every opportunity. They argued the case relied heavily on circumstantial evidence and insisted investigators had reached the wrong conclusion. They maintained that David's death was consistent with suicide and questioned whether the state's interpretation of the evidence was the only reasonable one. Ultimately, the responsibility belonged to 12 jurors. They listened carefully, reviewed every exhibit, considered every witness. After deliberating, they returned with their decision. 𝙭Castor was found guilty of murdering David Castor. She was also convicted of the attempted murder of Ashley Wallace by poisoning her and attempting to frame her through the fabricated confession. The verdict marked the end of years of deception that prosecutors argued had begun long before David's death. Although Michael Wallace's death remained officially unresolved because there was insufficient physical evidence after his cremation, investigators continued to believe his death fit the same disturbing pattern. Legally, however, 𝙭was never convicted in connection with Michael's death. She was sentenced to decades in prison, ensuring she would spend the remainder of her life behind bars. For Ashley Wallace, the verdict brought relief, but not peace. She had lost her biological father. She had lost her stepfather. Then she nearly lost her own life. The person investigators said orchestrated it all was the one person every child should be able to trust without question. Those emotional wounds could never be erased by a courtroom verdict. Years later, while serving her sentence, 𝙭Castor died in prison of natural causes in 2016 at the age of 48. With her death, many questions went unanswered forever. If she was responsible for Michael Wallace's death, only she knew exactly what happened during those final hours. Some mysteries followed her to the grave. The 𝙭Castor case remains one of America's most unsettling examples of how appearances can conceal devastating truths. It reminded investigators that a convincing story is not the same as the truth, that grief can sometimes become a disguise, and that even the most carefully planned deception can unravel when determined investigators refuse to accept easy answers. Justice did not arrive quickly. It took patience. It took relentless forensic work. It took investigators willing to question what everyone else believed. Most importantly, it took the survival of one young woman whose voice exposed a lie that might otherwise have been accepted forever. Sometimes, the greatest danger doesn't come from strangers hiding in the shadows. Sometimes, it sits across the dinner table, waiting for the perfect moment. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this documentary and want more carefully researched true crime stories told with respect for the victims and a commitment to the facts, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Whispered Pages, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next investigation. Until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, and remember, some of history's darkest secrets were hidden in plain sight.